This time I'd like to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Plaquemines Parish Council Audit Committee to order for the December 13th meeting at 9:30 a.m. in the morning. Machine is open for roll call. Let the record reflect that Ms. Trufant-Salvant is here, and I am here, and Mr. Juneau is absent today, and Mr. Randy Duke, representing the Internal Auditor's Office, is here as well. So at this time, we'll move to a Pledge of Allegiance. This is Audrey.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all, and good morning. We will begin with item 2A.
Discussion and consideration of a resolution entitled, "A Resolution to Adopt the Internal Audit Charter and the Institute of Internal Auditors Professional Standards, Red Book, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto."
This time, I'll offer next for a second, and then we'll have discussion led by Mr. Duke.
A second.
Offer in a second. Mr. Duke, is your mic on?
I concur with A. I think what we need to do is maybe add the PPG charter, section 7.08, under the audit committee to that list. The audit charter is a good document that I've been going by for years. I'm glad to see that being approved and put in place. The standards are very, very good standards that I've been following for many years. And so, basically this is going to be my protocol moving forward. The charter, though, the PPG charter, section 7.08, is really what I've been relying on most of all as the authority for this department. And I want to make sure that we get that approved as well. And I think that has already been approved, but I want to make sure everybody understands that's part of my protocol.
Okay, so on item 2B, are you saying that we need an amendment to this?
Yeah, I guess we probably do.
I think
need
it's
to
included.
add that to right before the internal audit charter, if you want to get them in proper order. I believe the PPG charter has the most authority. Then you would have the standards would be second and the charter would be third. But all encompassing, that's my protocol, what I've been going by since I got here.
Secretary, want to point that out, the correction we made?
In the first be it resolved, I have added, well, it now reads, be it resolved by the Plaquemines Parish Audit Committee that it hereby adopts the Plaquemines Parish Charter, Section 7.08, Audit Committee, the Internal Audit Charter, and the Institute of Internal Auditors Professional Standards, which are on file with the Council Secretary's Office.
So that takes care of your recommendation, Mr. Duke.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other discussion, any comments on the adoption of the protocol? Hearing none, machine is open. And the resolution is adopted 2-0. We move to item B.
Discussion and consideration of a resolution entitled, "A Resolution Recommending Audit Committee Resolution Number 18-5 be brought to the Parish Council for adoption as an ordinance, and that the Council Ordinance Number 14-158 rescinded, annulled, and set aside, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto."
And I'll offer next for a second.
A second.
Second by Councilman Salvant. Now, what we are attempting to do here is to make this recommendation that we just adopted as the Audit Committee as a ordinance for introduction to the full council and allow them to review this and adopt this ordinance if they choose to at the recommendation of the Audit Committee, so we'll all be on the same page. We'll have one ordinance that we will go by. We will follow the guidelines of the document that we just adopted, Internal Audit Charter and Statement of Function and Responsibility, which will start off with the basis as the parish charter as our baseline, and then we will move forward to the rest of the document, which is the blue book and so forth. So that's what this really does, is it repeats what we just did, but it refers this to the full council for adoption in the form of an ordinance. And if this Audit Committee passes it today, I'll be introducing it at the council meeting later today, and it'll lay over, and then we will meet with the newly elected council members to bring them up to speed to see if they are willing to put this on the books as the official operational scheme of the internal audit. Are there any comments or discussions on this item? Hearing none, machine is open. And the resolutions are adopted 2-0. So later today, at the council meeting, we'll introduce this further. Move to item C.
Discussion and consideration of a resolution entitled, "A Resolution to have the termination letter issued to Travis Fontenot withdrawn and removed from his personnel record, to accept Mr. Fontenot's letter of resignation and otherwise to provide with respect thereto."
I'll offer next for a second.
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Salvant. This item here is to solve the issue that we have had with Mr. Travis Fontenot and the position of the Assistant Internal Auditor. As you know, he was terminated on May the 15th of 2018. He filed an appeal with the Civil Service Board, and we had a hearing. That hearing resulted in some discussion among the Civil Service Board itself and members, and a realization of what really transpired prior to us getting to this point in time. So what this does, this allows the Civil Service Department to walk away from the issue without having to rule in anyone's favor. I believe that they realized that the decision that they were going to eventually have to make was a decision that they didn't want to really air out, so to speak. I think that the decision to be able to let Mr. Fontenot resign effective the date of his termination and drop his civil service appeal works in our favor, because it ends the decision, the conflict between us and him in an amicable way, which benefits him, as we will remove the letter of termination from his personnel file, and at the same time it'll allow the government and the internal audit department function forward to be able to replace the individual in that position, since it'll be a vacant position, without any worries that he will have any further appeal. So I think that the case that was put on at the Civil Service Department was an excellent case that we would have won, and in the end we win anyway because of the compromise settlement, and there's no harm, no foul to Mr. Fontenot. So I think that the committee and Mr. Duke and Mr. Danny Garrett deserve a lot of credit for being able to resolve this issue without a lot of cost, without a lot of litigation, and without having to hurt anybody's feelings, so to speak. So what this does is exactly what it says, and if you have any comments or discussion, the floor is open now. Mr. Duke, would you like to make any comments?
I concur with the Audit Committee, concur with what you just said. I had mentioned to Mr. Travis a while back that I would be happy to give him a letter of recommendation and also point him in a direction to a governmental entity that possibly could hire him. And
just so the record's clear, Mr. Fontenot is a fine individual. He just was not an auditor in this sense of what we need. And so he can do a lot of good accounting work somewhere, just not auditing work for us. Is that correct? Ms. Harvard?
Oh, yes. In addition to what already have been said, I think I agree with everything that has been said, but I think it all, my recommendation, first of all, should be that we should immediately, and when I'm saying we, I'm saying like the incoming council members should immediately replace this guy so we won't have the same problem, well, not the same problem, because as long as we got Mr. Duke in place, I think that goes a long way and speak for itself. But then again, you need that extended arm. And I think Mr. Fontenot and the previous internal auditor was a result of poor leadership in the previous audit committee. So I would hate to see this, have somewhat of the same problem to occur again. So all I'm trying to say is that I think we should not delay. The next council should not, audit committee should not delay in replacing Mr. Fontenot. So you can have that extended arm and that you need in that office.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay, any further comments? If not, machine is open. And the resolution is adopted 2-0. Next item.
Recap of the 2018 audits and progress of the Internal Audit Department.
Okay.
Mr. Duke?
I just want to mention in the beginning that I feel pretty good about the audits that I completed this year. I just want to make it my understanding as we go forward, I'm going to try to complete as many audits as I can and get as much coverage over the parish as I possibly can, hopefully with another individual helping me. But I want to make sure that we all understand that it's not quantity of the audits that we're going to be putting out. It's going to be quality. And we may put out 8 audits, but I'm hoping those audits will be high quality audits. If we put out 6 audits or 7 audits, the same thing. But I'm hoping that we can have more coverage next year in 2019 than I did in this year. So I'm definitely going to try for that. The objectives that I had coming in were to put some items in place. And I wanted to make sure that we had a management database in place, which I put in place. That is something that I'm very, very proud of. And we put Laserfish in place. It houses all of the internal audit department's information, audits. It puts everything in order. You don't have to go to Excel. And it's a teaching tool for another auditor that comes in, for my assistant as well. He'll be able to go to this and follow the internal audit process from A all the way through Z. And it'll help him get acclimated faster to do the examinations that I require. So we put that in place. We put the fraud hotline in place, which I think is pretty good. We haven't gotten a whole lot of reply on that yet, but I'm thinking that's going to change down the road. We put in place the annual audit schedules for 17, 18, and 19. We put in place the department's internal audit policies and procedures, working paper criteria, the audit charter, standards, and the code of ethics. I think all of those were items that I had to do when I first got here. The following internal audits that were completed in the beginning, the first one that I got my feet wet with was the employee expense, PPG, employee expense and mileage reimbursement audit. We got some good feedback on that. Mr. Peoples devised some policies that I felt were really, really good that the council put in place going forward. And we did a follow-up to that audit as well. The ferries department is still something, we did a follow-up to that, and I still have one outstanding item that I'm still concerned about, and that's the cash, which hasn't been fixed as yet. So that's something in 2019 that I need still need to follow up on and address to see if somehow we can reduce the amount of cash that's flowing through that department. Finish the Civil Service Department, to do a follow-up on that this year. The Port Visa credit card, got to do a follow-up audit on that. Make sure that's in place. And the port contracts and agreements, do a follow-up on that. So that being said, it's about seven audits that were done. This year has been, for me, a learning experience, trying to get an understanding of how the parish works, how the different departments work, and the auditable activities are available to me to audit. And so I have a good feel for it now, and going forward, I think that it'll be a lot easier for me going forward. And so hopefully get more audits done in 2019.
Alvin, you have anything?
No.
Okay, let me just comment. I think that completing 7 audits this year was a major accomplishment since we had just one individual in Department U. I think that we've made tremendous progress, and I know Mr. Juneau is not here today, but I want to thank my colleagues for working together to be able to revive this audit committee, making it a viable working audit committee that hasn't functioned in many, many years and hadn't produced any audits in many, many years. So I think we're on the right track. I'm sorry to see my colleagues leave, Ms. Salvon and Mr. Juneau. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I think without replacing them with the same quality of people, we would be lacking. So I'm hoping that the new people that are coming aboard, and whoever they may be, have the same dedication that these 2 individuals had towards making this audit department work and function as it should be. So thank you for that. And if not, we'll move to no other comments. We'll move to the next item.
Audits in progress. Number 1, Water Department internal audit. The internal audit has been started, and audit documentation to achieve the audit objectives is being obtained from the Water Department.
I have been in touch with the Water Department. I have a meeting with the Audit Department with Angela this afternoon, along with their new software person who's putting, I think it's AMI. They're going to come over and discuss that contract with me. The new meters that's going to be put in throughout the parish. There's a lot that I have been doing, a lot of interviews, a lot of planning. Miss Bartholomew is working very well with me. I look forward to having a good audit, probably out sometime in January. Now, that being said, I've just gotten into this Water Department audit. This is probably going to be an extensive type of examination. It's going to be probably along the line, if not more, than the port's contract audit. There's a lot of issues that I've looked at. The contract, for instance, there's a lot of stuff that I can't go over with you right now without going over with them first, but there's a lot of issues that I've found that's going to have to be resolved with the Water Department. But that being said, it is moving forward, and hopefully I'll get that done sometime in January or February. It may even be March, who knows. It all depends on what I run across. But it is a big audit, and it's a major source of revenue for PPG. So I need to really take my time with it and make sure it's done correctly and high-quality audit.
Thank you, Mr. Duke. Any further comments on this item?
No.
Hearing none.
Number 2, discussion of Water Department records retention schedule.
Yeah, I've been in touch with the Water Department in reference to the records retention, and let's see if we can put this email on the screen. My email doesn't seem to be coming up, but basically they said that they're keeping the records for a little over 3 years or 3 years. And in accordance with revised statute 4436, the Secretary of State's office cautions against disposal of records after 3 years because of federal guidelines that may require extended periods of time for preservation, thus making the creation of a formal retention schedule imperative. And there is a statute, it's RS Title 411 that requires for governmental agencies, requires a formal retention schedule be put in place. So I mentioned that to Ms. Bartholomew. She said that they have been keeping the records for 3 years, and she's not destroying any records. She's putting them, I think now she's putting them in a warehouse, the records. But that being said, even though they may be keeping all the records, they probably still need to make sure that you have a schedule that details out, say for instance, you have invoices. The invoices need to be kept for 3 years. If you have any legal type of documents, they may need to be kept for 7 years. Some records need to be kept for 10 years. All of this, the Secretary of State's office could tell you what records and how long you're supposed to keep them. So I advise them to get with the Secretary of State and to prepare this schedule for all of their records and make sure that all their records are documented in this schedule as to how long they need to keep them. And I think that'll be a good step forward for probably this whole parish, not just the water department.
Along those lines, Mr. Duke, I have been in touch with our council attorney, and he has prepared a draft for introduction that I will introduce today, following the guidelines of the Secretary of State and other items. And we'll introduce it today, and it'll lay over. And what we will do is get input from your office as well as from the rest of the new council members that will be coming in. And we'll see if we can get a document that will address the entire parish on document retention, and that's a goal for January. So he has done some legwork on this, and we do have a draft document that will be introduced today at the council meeting, and I'd encourage you to receive a copy of that, review it. And I know it's not included in your audit other than the water department, but it should give some guidelines to the rest of the departments to where when you do get to those departments, you can look at that item to see if they'll be complying with the new ordinance.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and this information I got from the Secretary of State is a best practice for the Louisiana legislative auditors. They require, in most instances, a formal retention schedule for all federal and state and local governmental agencies.
I think it's a good goal to work towards. As you know, we've had many issues, many reports in the local paper about records coming and going, not being able to find records. So I think it's time that we have a formal policy that everybody can understand and live with. And that way we'll be able to not point fingers at anybody about where the records are. We'll know where they are, what happened to them. And I would encourage that even if we do have a disposal of records, that we at least keep electronic copies. In this day and age, there should be no reason for us not to keep records long beyond what is required by law, just in case they're needed in the future on an electronic basis. And I'm hoping that we can get agreement on that.
Probably should go the same way with contracts as well. All PPG contracts.
Electronically?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I think that when we go out for bids for items and so forth, that we should be able to require all of those items be submitted electronically. I know that's what the New World does.
Yes, that's correct. And you really should have a situation where you have a centralized location, of course, for all your contracts. And for each contract, you should have certain documents attached to that contract, such as legal review, if it went through the RFP process, that documentation, your insurance policies, and any other items that should be attached to that the legislative auditors require. Especially the legal review. That's very important before the contract has been executed.
And in that legal review, that would require an attorney signing off on it as reviewed it for legal
Yes, sir.
clients?
Yeah, and also the different elements of the contract that he or she reviewed.
Okay?
Just a question just popped into my head. Is there a audit performed on President's office?
Excuse me, I didn't.
Do we perform audit on President?
Yes, that's an auditable activity, absolutely.
Okay.
You can do that. Has to be approved by the audit committee.
Okay.
But we could add that to the schedule if that's something the audit committee wants.
Just a question. I was just wondering.
Right. Okay. I don't know who the new audit committee members will be, but I look forward to them coming aboard and getting them up to speed as to where we are and see if we have a direction of a majority of the board members and where we want to go. Okay, any further discussion on that item? Hearing none, move to item 4.
Approval of the minutes from the November 8, 2018 meeting.
Do we have an offer?
No, but I would like to make a comment before we move to the approval of the minutes. You've had your say, Mr. Russo. Now I want to have my say on my. This is officially my last day as serving as a audit committee member, as a council member, and I just would like to say ditto to the comments that Mr. Russo made earlier. It was my pleasure as well to work with Mr. Russo and Mr. Juno, and I just learned so much from Mr. Russo. I want to say that, his leadership was awesome on his audit committee and as a council member, and I'm just hoping that the incoming council members would note that the leadership and the experience and the knowledge that he has and use it to the best of their ability to move this parish forward. I don't have any quorums. I know it may have been some issues along the way, but for the most part, I'm in a good place. I feel good about my tenure. I feel good about my accomplishments, and I enjoyed working with each and every one of you all. And Mr. Duke, it's been a real pleasure working with you, and I want to thank you for the job that you've done for this parish. But again, Mr. Roussel, I want to thank you for the help and the knowledge and that you passed on to me, and the direction that you gave me, and along with Mr. Juno, y'all have been very respectful and helpful, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And like I said, we had a great committee.
Yes, we did.
No other business. We'll go to item 4.
Approve of the minutes from the November 8, 2018 meeting.
We have an offer.
I offer.
Salvant offers. I'll second. Any comments or discussion on the adoption of the minutes from November the 8th? Hearing none, machine is open.
You didn't do it? Okay. Yes, I'll do the verbal. Verbal, yes.
Okay, the minutes are adopted 2-0. That concludes the business today before the audit committee. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I know it.
The Salvant moves to adjourn. I'll second. Machine is open.
Hit it hard this time.
That's my machine that I use at the council meeting, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
And the meeting is adjourned at 10 a.m. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next year.
I'll be watching from afar.